is always looking for. Now, who better to teach us more about Economics 101 than Ken Rogoff? He is professor of economics at Harvard University. Thanks so much for being here. I know you've been watching this very carefully. Let's start first with the I see that little cynical smile. But okay, look, a president can't be expected to say, I want the Fed to raise interest rates. That's just not his or her job. Do you see this as damaging, especially now that he's said it twice and apparently will say it again?
Well, first of all, most presidents feel this way. They don't like it when interest rates go up, and they are always stifling themselves not to say anything about it. To be fair, so far, Donald Trump's been good to the Federal Reserve. He's made good appointments. He hasn't been all over them. But you do worry that this is the beginning of something more. I mean, I remember when he was just mildly criticizing the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, and the next thing he's fired. You see this pattern. I'm really worried about what will happen if the economy weakens, particularly around the election. He might say, well, I know inflation's going to go up. I think you explained that well, Paula. But you know what? I'm worried about the economy right now. Inflation's in the future. So this is a real long-term risk to the healthy economy.
When we say long-term risk, you made a key point there, appointments. And they've been solid so far. He has a lot of appointments to go on the board, as well as the actual 12-person committee that's in charge of actually raising or lowering those rates or keeping them where they are. Do you think he can influence this just by the nominees he puts in place?
He absolutely can. I mean, Congress plays a big role in this. But the Fed is not independent the way the Supreme Court is. It's independent because we've been treating it as independent, and it's a relatively recent construct. I mean, Richard Nixon in 1972, when he wanted to get reelected, he was cursing at the Fed chairman, Arthur Burns, pushing him to push up the money supply. He pushed it up like crazy. Nixon got reelected, and we got the inflation of the 70s. Don't rule that out. I mean, it's very early days, but, with this president, this has been one of my biggest concerns. The stock market has been incredibly blasé about everything else going on because they say, well, he's left the Fed alone. As long as the Fed's doing a job, we're okay. But if he's not doing well, and I wouldn't rule out anything with this president.
And that is key here for two reasons. One is that other central banks are watching, right? When he talks about the currency, it's the American dollar in relationship to every other currency, and other central banks, what they will do with their money supply, and the markets. As you said, they have great confidence in Chairman Powell right now. Do you fear that some of that equation, other central banks and the chairman and his independence, will actually spook these markets?
Well, not yet. I mean, but, every day brings new surprises. I thought the trade war was just a threat. I didn't think we'd be putting tariffs on all Chinese imports, which he's talking about now. So, I just don't know. I think as long as the economy is doing well and he doesn't look like he's falling off the earth in terms of his reelection, he'll leave the Fed alone. But all bets are off. Nothing's sacrosanct. Nothing's safe. If he feels insecure about getting reelected and he feels goosing up the economy, using the Fed is going to help get it done. And yes, he has tools to do it. Could be counterproductive. He could get the Fed mad. They want to prove their independence and they raise rates faster. But they got to be careful because their independence is very fragile, not the Supreme Court.
Well, and I keep thinking of that phrase, right? You serve at the pleasure of the president. And you made a very key point there about the fact that, it isn't like the Supreme Court. This is not like that at all. Can you remind us again, because you brought up the 1970s, how quickly inflation can sneak up on people and how it can absolutely demolish an otherwise healthy economy?
Well, we had inflation, something like, 13 or 14%. Japan and the United Kingdom were over 20%. It doesn't come really fast, actually, but once it starts creeping up, it's hard to turn it around without really crushing the economy. That's been the Fed's fear. Frankly, if inflation went to 3% or even 4% for a while, it's not such a big deal. But the problem is it's hard to rein it back in. So that's why they kind of don't want to let it get out of control. We're not going to get to 20% inflation in a year. That just is not going to happen. But if he keeps steadily pushing on the Fed, he undermines its independence. What you could suddenly see is long-term interest rates, 30-year rates, 10-year rates. They could soar because people say, whoa, you know, the lid is off on inflation. When we put our money in something, we want to know we're getting a big return to make up for inflation. That's where it can really hurt the economy.
Yeah, and the takeaway from this, as you've told us, is expect anything at this point from the president when it comes to the economy.
Yeah.
We'll go into the weekend with those thoughts. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.